On this episode of the Encyclopedia, you as a jury of one have to decide if Jesus is alive, and I'm presenting 4 pieces of indisputable evidence. Number 1, the empty tomb. Friend and foe of Jesus admit it. Traditional Jewish and Roman sources acknowledge it, like Josephus and Phlegon. The skeptic Celsus admits it, and the historian Eusebius said Pilate reported it to Emperor Tiberius and took it to the Senate. Legally, this is called positive evidence from a hostile source, or admission against interest, which is the strongest kind of evidence. If a source admits a fact decidedly not in its favor, then that fact is genuine. It would be reasonable that maybe one ancient historian, one skeptic, would record that they had seen Christ's body, but there's nothing. The silence of history is deafening when it comes to testimony against the resurrection. Number 2, early eyewitnesses. Unfortunately, women were considered second-class citizens in ancient patriarchal Jewish and pagan circles, and they were considered unreliable. In fact, Jewish law once wrote, "Better the words of the law burnt than to be delivered to women." But the gospel writers state that women, rather than men, were the first discoverers of the empty tomb. Legally, this is called evidence from a criterion of embarrassment, which gives good reason to believe the tomb was empty. The gospel writers were simply telling the truth. Additionally, there's a first century report of the resurrection of Jesus Christ that names numerous eyewitnesses, hundreds of them. It says Jesus died for our sins, he was buried, he rose from the dead, and these eyewitnesses saw the risen Christ. And this report is dated within months of his death. Number 3, existence of the early church. Why would a group of hardcore Jewish people go from years of tradition and obeying the strict law of Moses to living in submission to Christ? From animal sacrifice to Christ's sacrifice, from monotheism to recognizing the Trinity, from centuries of observing the Sabbath on Saturday to Sunday worship, from believing in a political revolutionary Messiah to believing in a sacrificial Messiah, from strict adherence to circumcision to now observing baptism and communion, and to do so receiving nothing for their sacrifice, no money, no power, no position, fame, or political influence, and under extreme persecution, and eventually to their miserable deaths. This is legally called evidence from sincerity, or the martyrdom argument. If the disciples had stolen the body of Jesus, they would have known that the resurrection claim was false. And yes, people die for lies, but people don't willingly die for that which they know is a lie. Nevertheless, the disciples never wavered in their commitment to the risen Jesus. They faced hardship, ridicule, hostility, and martyrs' deaths. In light of all this, they could have never sustained such unwavering motivation if they knew what they were preaching was a lie. Number 4, evidence from the Bible. Skeptics will say, you can't use the Bible, that's circular reasoning. Frank Turk says, Christianity would be true if the Bible never existed. How can that be? It's because Christianity did not originate with a book. Christianity originated with an event, the resurrection. There were thousands of Christians before a line of the New Testament was ever written. How? Because they witnessed the resurrected Jesus and then they wrote it down. They didn't write it down, invent it, and then believe it. They witnessed it and then they wrote it down. The New Testament writers did not create the resurrection. The resurrection created the New Testament writers. And as such, we have 4 historically accurate biographical sources that say that Christ is alive, written in 25,000 plus ancient manuscripts. Of any ancient event in history, the evidence that verifies it is true or not is about 1 or 2 sources. But the amount of evidence that is given for the disciples having witnessed the risen Christ, at minimum 9 sources both within and outside the Bible. This is an avalanche. The amount of legal evidence that points toward Jesus actually living, dying, and being resurrected is overwhelming. No intelligent jury in this world could fail to bring in a verdict that the resurrection account was true. Therefore, as a jury of one, you have to decide. Believe the truth or deny it. To truly believe, confess, and trust in it means life. To deny it brings eternal consequences. It is time for you to decide.